Hello. Like I was saying when I made a couple of videos ago, that I have forgotten a large part of my childhood because it was so long ago. It's like every so often there's still things I remember that come up, and I was talking to my mother-in-law about this because interestingly enough, she was raised by a narcissistic mother, so we have a lot of similar issues. And I was saying how stupid census paperwork, they sent it to my house like 8 times. How, I talk about my mother in my videos as being sort of this kind of extroverted, dominating, like alpha bitch personality. And I was always very introverted, and she hated that about me. And I think from very early on, she took my introverted personality, and turned it into something worse than it was. How she would always, every time I'd tell her about a situation or she'd see something, she'd always interpret it to the side that I'm always the doormat that doesn't speak up. Even when that wasn't really true and things were out of my control, she would always like try to narrate it that way. Or even if I'd come home from work and tell her a situation, she'd have to like retell it for me because she, not she would assume that, oh well, you just say quiet and don't do anything, you're just, you're too afraid to speak up. Or she would have to retell the story that it happened differently than it did, because not only am I a doormat, but I'm so clueless, I'm so socially backwards and socially retarded that I really don't even know what happened either. I need her to tell me how it happened, even though I was there and she wasn't. And I think a lot of this, starting from when I was a child, yeah, I think she did resent the fact that my personality was so opposite to hers, but I think that's what narcissists do anyway when they want to control somebody, and they want to control somebody, going into their adulthood, like control a child into their adulthood. They sort of plant ideas in your head that you can't do it yourself, or you're weak somehow, or like you can't function as well as other people, that kind of thing. And I remember a story where, I remember being in about second grade, and I do wonder sometimes, like I've said in the past, I've wondered over the years if I might be autistic, or if I have like Asperger syndrome or something. And people are like, oh no, you just think that because you were abused. But I remember very young, like second grade, my teacher, apparently she said something to my mother because she was concerned about my behavior, that it's like not only was I quiet, but I literally just had no interest in interacting at all. Like I had no real interest in my peers, and it seemed kind of like I would go to school and do my work or whatever, and the people in my class would just sort of like background noise. Like it never really occurred to me to try to be part of the group. And then, if I didn't really participate in class discussions because I didn't see the point. It's like, well, if I know the answer and I get it right on the test, why do I need to have everyone else know that I know the answer? Like it just didn't occur to me. Like that kind of stuff. Like that's the thing. Like I I do have a bit of a, I don't know if it's like a social blindness or just like I'm just not wired to be so, like from very young I just was not, I just didn't really acknowledge other kids, or it didn't occur to me or something. Like it's something other than just low self-esteem or anxiety. But my mother took that, like, even if, I feel like even if I am clinically like on some sort of spectrum or something, it's, even if I am, it's very mild, and my mother still made it 10 times worse than it was. So she started lecturing me at 7 or 8 years old about my lack of assertiveness and my low self-esteem. Meanwhile, how do you even have low self-esteem at 7? Are you even old enough at that point to even form a self-concept? Like, do you really even have self-esteem at that age? Like any, or like a set self-image? No. Um, so it was she's like, "Oh, you need to be more assertive." And she started telling me a story about how 2 years earlier, when I was in kindergarten, like this is going back to kindergarten now, 2 years before this incident, where I think I graduated kindergarten, and they had a cake for everybody, and they cut it into squares, and kids were going up and taking pieces of cake. And my mom was claiming that at this party that I just stood there and didn't do anything and let my classmates cut in front of me, and my mom had to intervene and get a piece of cake for me. She's telling me this example to show me at 7 years old what a doormat I am, and how I'm such a weak person, and how I can't do anything for myself. So this is what she tells me, right? That she goes to get a piece of cake for me, and the teacher said something. She's like, "Oh, she'll get it herself." And she tells me that she told the teacher, "No, I know her better than you do. I know she's just going to stand there and not speak up." So not only is she telling the teacher this at 5, 6 years old about me, but she's telling me after it happened that that's what she said to the teacher. Like, does anybody... You see what's wrong with this, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, not only did she do it, but she had to tell me what she did years after it actually happened. So, even if I am autistic or something, there's more to the story. She wanted me to believe that I had no spine and people were going to take advantage of me if she didn't intervene. Because who says that to somebody that age? And secondly, this whole incident about the cake and other people cutting in front of me, I've always had a very, my long-term memory has always been scary accurate. Like, I would remember something from 10 years earlier, and I remember dates, what people were wearing. I've always had, like, a scary long-term memory. And I had even as a child, and I had no recollection of this incident. None. So I'm wondering if this incident she was telling me about ever even really happened. Seriously, or if it did, but she twisted it to make it worse than it was. Or even if it did happen and she did intervene and get me a piece of cake, obviously I didn't remember it. So I obviously wasn't that upset. You know what I mean? Like, if I'd been crying about it, like, "Oh, they cut in front of me and took my cake," like, I didn't even remember it. I obviously wasn't even upset. So that's another thing she does too. Like, if I am upset about something, she kind of belittles me for that. Like, I'm like some overly emotional, like, weak crybaby. But then if I'm not upset about something, she tries to make me upset about it. So this is just like, these people are full of paradoxes and irony, and that's just one example. But yeah, I had no recollection of this event. So either it didn't happen, which truthfully I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen, or it did, but it really didn't even bother me. So it, like, how big of a deal even was it that I didn't cut in front of everybody and grab a piece of cake for it? Like, obviously, like, it didn't even bother me. So, you know, and the whole thing with this, like, "Oh, you're too introverted, you're not assertive enough." Every school year with her had a new theme to it on why I was defective. Like, the whole thing with the weight and the food and the dieting, that started actually, she started that with me at 6 years old. "You're fat, you need to go on a diet, you're gaining too much weight, you need to watch what you eat." It's at 6 years old. And then a year or two later, she sort of stopped talking about the weight. You know, she still talked about it, but not as much. And then when that kind of became outdated, she started on the personality stuff. "You're too introverted, people are going to take advantage of you. I noticed this person did this and you didn't say anything." Like, it became every little social move I made was scrutinized. So that was after the weight. Then it became the social stuff. And then when I was having issues in junior high, I was always an A student, but then I started junior high and my grades dropped a bit because I had a rough time adjusting. And I think 90% of it was because of her bullshit, but she would never admit that. So then it became like organization, like, oh, your grades aren't good enough, you're disorganized anyway, now your room is messy, your book bag, you're this, you're that. So it's like every school year had a new theme on why I was defective, and she would just go like it was never, she never stuck to one thing. It wasn't like, oh, you're great, you know, you just I'm concerned because you're unhealthily overweight. No, it was never that. It was every school year she attacked me from a different angle. And I'm sorry, but you don't see too many 6 and 7-year-olds dying of obesity. And I was never even obese. I think, you know, even in high school, I was depressed, my weight yo-yoed a bit. I think at my heaviest, I was at the high end of the BMI. Like, my BMI was like 25, borderline overweight. I was never even spoken to by any doctors, like, as a teenager. Even I already had a complex by then because of my mother's bullshit, so I remember asking a doctor as a teenager when they weighed me, I'm like, is this like really obese? And she's like, no, for your height and build, this is still normal. You know, like, the doctor didn't even think even when I asked, like, they like dismissed me. So, and now it's like, I'm like in the middle of the BMI, I guess. I'm not super skinny. My body's not really designed to be super skinny. But, you know, it's like, I get flack for that too. Like, well, you're not really thin, you know. Not so much from my mom, but from her bitchy sister. You know, that's a whole other thing. But, yeah, I guess, you know, I'd forgotten a lot of things from my childhood, but that's something that sort of came up recently. The whole that whole attack on my personality and trying to reinforce what a weak, timid mouse I was, like, all through my life. But I think anybody with common sense knows that if you do that, you're just gonna make somebody more of that. You know what I mean? Just keep reinforce, like, even if I felt like I was doing better or feeling more insecure with myself, she would hit me with something like that again. And then I feel like, oh, well, I must really be off base because I think I'm doing better, but maybe I'm not. Like, there's just a lot of ways that fucks with your head. It's like, not only are you not good enough because of X, Y, and Z, but, like, when you start to get happier, then you feel dumb because, like, you don't even see how defective you are. It just hits you from so many different angles. And so I forgot about that one incident she told me about, and that she told me about that when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I wonder to this day if that event with the cake even happened. You know, like, because I have no recollection of it at all. And even if it did, the fact that I don't remember it means I wasn't that upset. So, you know, but another thing too, like, I could just keep going and going and going with how much is wrong with this whole thing. When she brought this to my attention, about this event, it was already 2 years later, or almost 2 years later. So she had been holding this in her head the whole time to use against me. Like, she saw it, thought it was a little bit abnormal, held it in her head, and held resentment over it to use against me whenever. There is just from that one story, there is just so much, so much that you can take away from it. So that is just, I guess I'll stop for now. That was kind of longer than I meant it to be, but that was just an incident that I remember, and I think it shows that being shy aside, or even if I was autistic or something, even if that were true, she wanted to reinforce the narrative that I was a weak doormat repeatedly, year after year after year, into my 20s. Because a lot of it, even if it was true in some situations, it wasn't true in all situations, and a lot of it just wasn't even necessary. So that's, I guess, the end of the video, and I'll see you soon.